Discover with Dr. Dan, the Proactive Health Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Brilliant, an innovative proactive wellness company. Brilliant helps people to live a healthier and happier life by discovering and using bioactive natural ingredients to formulate products that help them discover and unleash their innate brilliance. See feelbrilliant.com for more information. Today, we'll be talking with Betsy Thurston about a lot of really cool things related to eating. A little bit about Betsy. Betsy is a registered dietitian and health coach at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. She earned her undergraduate degree from Cornell University and a master's degree in public health nutrition from the University of North Carolina. Her current work is in the area of nutritional psychology. Betsy has her own practice and podcast called Binge Dieting. Learn how to change your relationship with eating. She works with people who live on diets, who try to change but can't, who might have binge eating or other eating disorders. One of the most powerful experiences that has motivated Betsy's work is her journey with a child with a 10-year history of extreme drug addiction, where he knew that the way to be healthy and happy was to stop using drugs, but he couldn't. Betsy is a firm believer that you can be logical all day long, but we are emotional beings, and what we need to work with is the mind. Betsy, so great to have you on the show with us.
Love being here. So, yeah.
Great. So let's go ahead and get started. You talk about the field, your area of emphasis being nutritional psychology. Now, that might be, two words that we've heard separate, but maybe not together. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what that field is?
Well, I used to be the registered dietitian that is in the way all dietitians act is you give out meal plans and you talk about food and structure and portions and intuitive eating and all that. Mm-hmm. In hospitals, I just did outpatient. But I found that over and over and over, people would take my meal plan, my good ideas, and they would come back the next week or 2 weeks and it would be like, oh, I did that for an hour. I did that for 3 days.
Okay.
And over and over and over, they couldn't do what I wanted them to do. So you'd have to I began to realize if I can't find the block to why they can't do it, we're not going to get anywhere. So that's what got me. And also, in addition to my son, my stuff, I have a lot of inner anxiety for whatever reason. And I began studying how do I get out of my head. And through all that, that's where I took everything I learned to my dietitian stuff. And little by little, I started to see so much more progress.
So what
got people to change.
So what you're saying is it's not just the information that we're given, but it's getting that information from the brain to the part of the body where we actually do make those decisions and change.
Exactly. The information is fantastic that you give, and there's nothing wrong with the information. Sometimes it's too extreme and it's not right for everybody, and people get confused. So sometimes there's that.
Right.
But it's more the application. Because in a perfect world, we want to do what we want to do, but then we go out on a weekend and we be with friends, or we go out to a gathering and there's a momentum at the at the table and everyone's eating and drinking.
Right.
And you're just going to naturally want to fit in or belong. You don't want to be left out. We have this innate need to connect through food. So out the window go any goals we have. Over and over and over. We get too busy. We forget to go to the grocery store. We don't have the healthy foods at home. And we're perfectionistic and we're in a hurry and we want to succeed and we do what's quick and easy. And that's convenience foods, and that's how that's what happens.
Okay. So what are some tips that we can do to get out of that trap? You describe myself, right? I'm like, well, I'm not going to eat dessert, when I go and visit family or friends or whatever. And then you sit there after dinner and, it just happens. Before you know it, you end up with a slice of cake and some ice cream and you're like, oh man, how did this happen?
Well, I love the model of the mind called internal family systems. It's this brilliant model, and it says that we are human beings with a brain organized compartmentally, parts that are trying to protect us.
Okay.
From anything, and also parts that hold our pain or our stories of woe. Mm-hmm. So we have a million different eating parts that try to protect us. And some people have an eat to fit in part, and eat to rebel, and eat to rebel against our own inner dictator or our inner perfectionistic, you better be good part. So in that moment, you're out with friends. What do? If you've already spent some time looking inward at your inner world and being curious and realizing your patterns, you'll say, I have a part of me that when I'm out with friends, it takes me over, and I have to be caught up in the moment, and I wonder what would happen if that part wasn't there. What am I afraid to feel? There's a key question. You connect with the part that you get to know that's a regular part, and you talk to it. Literally, Internal Family Systems is about having an inner conversation. You're talking to your eating part. Eating part, you say to your mind, although it's hard to do that if you haven't done it in a group when you haven't practiced. But what are you afraid would happen if I don't pick up my fork and continue eating past being full? What do you think? What are you afraid would happen if everyone orders a dessert and I pause and say no, thank you? What are you afraid I would feel or something? So it's about curiosity, noticing, pausing, knowing your patterns, getting a literal relationship with the parts in us that need to do what they do. So.
Interesting. So it's a little bit like cognitive behavioral therapy when you go through that, and you practice mindfulness, and you talk about what's the worst thing that can happen, different scenarios. I know with OCD and ADHD, that's kind of the process with these habitual compulsions. So that's really interesting. So how do you go about having this conversation with yourself? Is there, do you start writing it down? How would we do that?
Okay, and I want to say one thing.
Yep.
CBT, cognitive behavioral, is really great and very effective, and this is not internal family systems. They are actually very different.
Okay.
What I did use a little CBT, kind of like trying to be curious and ask those questions with the part. Internal family systems takes it a whole nother level, and it is about connecting with the part in a way that you are witnessing this thing in you. So it is an experiential process. It's more in the heart. It's not just thinking. It's an experience of being connected, merging with a thing in you that impulsively needs you to eat in that moment. It's actually quite different. So the key concept of this model is it's centered around being a watcher and an observer and a separate kind of thing, the real you, the essence of you, almost a spiritual you. It's about finding that place, calm, curious, creative, connected, compassionate. These are qualities, start with letter C, of this space. And from that space, then you might, how do you do it? Sometimes I say to myself, okay, imagine you're in a hallway, in your mind, a hallway of higher wisdom. Pretend there's a hallway and you sit there, and in the hallway there's no problems, and you're curious and calm, and there you are in your mind. And pretend for a minute that there's a part in you that's really activated. It's triggered. Someone says something and you're upset, or you're feeling ugly or fat or you're whatever. Pretend that thing in you is across the hall, down the hall in a room. Sit in a hallway and notice from a distance, oh, there's a thing over there in the hallway of my mind. And you'll say, well, how do you feel towards that thing over there? Because if you hate it, I hate you who make me eat, get away. You can't connect with it.
Okay.
So you try to connect with this, whatever part in you, without being overwhelmed or scared or fearful or hating it. Just neutral. You're an observer. So if you can get there and separate, then you'll kind of connect with it more. And how do you talk to it? Generally, a lot of these protective parts have been trying to do this for 10 years or a lifetime. So a lot of people I work with have had patterns of grabbing food to suppress emotions or whatever since childhood. So you might be like, oh, hi, you're the part of me that needs me in this moment to eat. It just needs that. Well, what are you worried about? Or, and you want to just be still and listen. This is about listening to what the wisdom from within of this thing in you. And you might want to be like, well, how long have you been doing this? Like, what happened when you were born, created? Because a key thing in this model is parts inside us become extreme. And so that's the problem. When parts that perfectionism, workaholism, eating, a million things, being a good girl, being a caretaker, when any part that we have in our psyche that's trying to help us is forced into an extreme role because of too much inner fear or a traumatic experience, then there's a complete disruption inside. It's about finding the peace. And so you just kind of have that kind of a conversation. If you stay separate and curious, it's hard to do.
Right.
When you're very activated.
Right. So you talk about the example of binge eating, where we just want to go and eat food to, we're stressed or whatever emotional response. So this concept, is this something we would do beforehand? How do we get to that stage? So, before we go to the pantry and just start going to town.
I'll be honest that it for a lot of people, it is really hard to do on your own, and finding an internal family systems therapist would be a really good first step. It is a tricky model. I mean, there are some books on Amazon, self-help, that's how I started, actually. Doing it on your own. But it is really hard. So getting some guidance is where, and you start by noticing when you're other than peace, joy, and happiness. When you're in a state of just angst, or you're doing that thing you always do. I always yell at my kids. I'm reacting. I'm angry. Or, in this podcast, I keep eating the wrong things. I don't know what to do. And so you start there, and you just try to find the thing in you. And it usually lives somatically, like it's a tension, it's in the body. And you find it, and you try to be curious. So why do you do this? What are you afraid would happen if I don't eat? And it really is such a brilliant model of the brain. And you realize the brain is so organized. It just is, it needs to protect you, and you're just trying to figure it out. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I was just thinking about different things. So my weight loss journey, I was 210 pounds. And then over the course of 3 or 4 years, I lost close to 60 pounds. And it was interesting. One of the things that helped me was having this vision of what I wanted to be and how I wanted to change. And, it got to the point where that was so firmly in my mind that whenever I went to do something, right, to eat something that, I knew I shouldn't, I would have that vision, and that would help me. So this is interesting. This is another really interesting way that we can help to control, it seems like all habits, but especially our eating habits.
And what's funny that you even just said that? I just recorded, which I haven't released yet, a podcast on manifesting.
Okay.
And it's all about that. It's creating a vision, sticking with it. I love this idea of manifesting and mental movie. Here's what I have found. It works for some people, and it really is impossible for others.
Right.
because there's too much inner noise. So somebody like you, for whatever reason, was able to lose this weight. Mm-hmm. And the people I work with can't do it. They can't have the vision and stay focused on it because the need to eat is stronger than the need to be with a vision. The need to protect, or the need to go back to your old habits, or it's these addictive tendencies. This is very backed up to the biology of the brain and trauma. Trauma isn't like I was attacked or the obvious trauma. It's I was dismissed or not loved enough or not validated as a young child by well-meaning parents. That's also trauma. And so most people, or many people, have that life. And so they're unable to do what you did, man.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
But the manifesting is amazing, but the people I work with have blocks, and that's the whole thing. Once you work with the parts that keep you from success or failure, then you can manifest like you did.
I see. So you need to get to a place where you can use those tools.
Yes.
Forward. Okay. Let's go to another really interesting subject. You've talked a lot about obesity and, people wanting to lose weight. We all want to lose weight. And you've done some really interesting things with weight loss, wanting to lose weight, and obsessing about losing weight. What are your thoughts on that? Where weight loss can become an obsession.
This is the whole problem. So for people who really want to lose weight and need to lose weight medically, whatever, right, the strength of the need, the desire to lose weight becomes the problem, which is like the opposite of manifesting right there. So here's what happens. People I work with are completely, like I'll tell you, like I worked with somebody last week. She was utterly obsessed with wanting to lose weight, so much so that it was shutting her down. It was so demanding and perfectionistic, and it took it too far. And because it's too much energy to hold in the system, because it was rooted in fear. For her, it was rooted in fear of illness and not being available for her children. For her, it was rooted in diabetes and bedridden or whatever. And this fear was wildly exaggerated, but whatever. So when the desire for anything is too strong, like there's a spiritual concept, you have to detach from outcome. And when it's too strong, the fear inside creates disruption. So in other words, suppose you have a desire off the walls, off the charts, 10 out of 10, but then you mess up or you don't do what you say you're going to do. You feel like such a failure because the desire and the panic, oh no, I'm going to be in bed for life because I did this. The panic becomes overwhelming. And then it creates a cycle, which is then you feel shame. And then you overeat because food, drugs, and alcohol are the 3 top tier ways to get the brain to relax. So this works about this system of parts working together. I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of probably got off in a little bit.
No, that's interesting.
The intensity. Think of a pendulum. Because in binge eating, if there's a pendulum, like you're a science guy, the pendulum.
We love pendulums.
Okay, pendulum. As wide as you get over on this side on desire for lose weight will create that degree, that direction of the desire to escape from the need to lose weight by rebelling against it or needing balance of binging.
Okay.
So if here's point 0, the farthest if you're that far on gotta lose weight, you're likely to go that far to, who cares? I'll do what I want. I just need to stop and I'll eat. So the goal here is to move from the desire there to the desire here.
Okay.
So if we're not so obsessive about it and we we are reasonable and we know you're right. It would be very helpful to lose weight for a million reasons. And you're here, but you're forgiving and you're gentle and you're not beating yourself up. Then you're much less likely to go off the rails and eat. You'll stay in the middle zone.
Okay.
So that, and this is a key concept across the board in this model of internal family systems, is a part of me gets angry and a part of me hates that I get angry. It's
right.
polarized. So anyway.
So this concept that you just mentioned applies to binge eating. It applies to losing weight. It applies to, you mentioned, even outside of eating. So it applies to a lot of different concepts here.
Applies to life. Everything in life. The degree to which you want anything is the degree to which, if it's too strong, you might have born in you a part to seek that inner balance.
Right.
And to go the other direction. We want the harmony. The inner landscape of any human being is best when it's in harmony.
Right.
And anything you want too much creates disharmony. Now, you were a lucky guy that a lot of people can do, get a visualization, stick with it, and be really driven and motivated. And so it really worked for you. And that's wonderful.
Well, it was really hard. But for whatever reason, and I've worked with other people that it doesn't, but for whatever reason, having that vision and just kind of replaying it and pulling it up again and again, it helped. And then, the need or the desire gradually left until it was like, it wasn't even appealing. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Right. So, your part that needed to succeed. You have an energy of a very driven, capable, you're just a natural manifester. I mean, everything about you, your whole podcast, and you were able to use that energy towards a really good cause. So it works. So you were really taking advantage of one of your strengths, which really worked. Yeah.
So you talked about this pendulum. And if we're 10 on both sides and it's swinging wildly, the key question, I guess, and it's the one we're all thinking about, is how do we then get more towards, 3 and 3 or 4 and 4 versus this 10 and 10, this destructive cycle?
So in the moment, you got to drop into the body, drop in. Dick Schwartz, the founder of Internal Family Systems, says you do the U-turn. So, number one, you got to pay attention, which means you got to be curious and calm and be willing to just take the pause. So, there's that. So, then you get comfortable and familiar. You get a relationship with this part over time. It's a relational model. And you get a relationship with it long enough so the quote eating part that needs, or addictive food or whatever, needs a 10 out of 10.
Right.
You get a relationship between you, kind of higher self, you, and it. So it trusts you that, you'll say to it, can you trust me? Let's do a trial period for 2 weeks. You might say to the part.
Right.
When you're there, I'll acknowledge that you're there and that you're worried that I could be obese and I need to lose weight. If I acknowledge you and connect with you, could you calm down and not be so extreme and not freak out if I make a little mistake and not be perfectionistic and rigid or something like that? So you pay attention, you get a relationship, and it develops over time. You say to this part that might have been doing this for 10 years, I'm older now. I have an abilities that I didn't have back then. Let me take over. Let me and my higher self, try to be in this moment of wanting all that food and waiting, hesitating for 15. So let me take care of this. Me, like the me who's watching.
Right.
It's kind of a weird thing, but yeah. So, and you might do a trial, and I do. My clients do food records.
Okay.
So notes. So they're looking at their patterns and we're finding exactly times and yeah.
Okay.
So it is combined with practical.
Interesting. So do they write, in addition to just a food diary, do they write, feelings they're having or this process as they're going through this thought process?
I do. My food records are not like my Fitness Pal calories and stuff. They're intuitive eating. So column 1, day and time you're about to put something in your mouth. Column 2, physically in your body, are you hungry or not?
Mm-hmm.
-10 to +10. All minuses mean I'm starving or I'm a little hungry, whatever. 0 is neutral. Plus is I'm satisfied, I'm full, I'm stuffed.
Okay.
So we're just noticing. Okay, so you realize you're about to eat. Let's say it's 7 at night. You're bored. You've had a long day. You're exhausted, and you've already had dinner, and you're about to eat. And on my form will be like, oh, I'm not hungry, but I'm about to eat. Okay, so you write down the number. I'm a +2, and I'm about to eat. The next column on my form says, what are you feeling right now? And what are you thinking? What are you doing? It's like, what's the emotion or whatever? So you're just being curious. And then what do you eat?
Mm-hmm.
And I like intuitive eating is all about dropping into the body and sensing, is that enough? Am I tasting it? Which is a whole other body of work, which is super helpful.
Right.
And so just noticing what would be the right amount. And then on my form, after you finish eating, I have another column that says, well, now, are you full? Are you satisfied? What is it? So a lot of people really are disconnected. They don't know what fullness feels. They don't know what's enough. They don't feel their insides. And a lot of people have triggers, like they're scared of their hunger. They're afraid they're going to overeat. They're scared sometimes of their fullness because if they feel full, they feel like they're a loser and they're fat. So anyway, it is complicated. So that's my form. And then another column says, what else is relevant? Like, did you work out a lot today? Do you need a lot of food today? Or are you angry or something going on? That's how we track my food records. So we're looking at patterns. I want to know, how many times a day are people eating? Are they eating every 2 hours? Do they need to eat every 2 hours? I'm looking at, is there protein? That's so important. Is there, and I'm obsessed with color, vegetables and fruits. And so I'm just looking at the patterns, like all of that.
Right.
Are we skipping meals? Are you going 8 hours without eating? Well, no wonder you're overeating.
Right.
So it's all that.
So I'm glad you brought up the intuitive eating, because I think that's something that our listeners have heard. There's book titles, it's around in the health and wellness industry. But I think a lot of our listeners don't really understand that concept or didn't before. So this was amazing. Is there anything else about intuitive eating you'd like to say?
Yeah, intuitive eating holds the belief that if we could get out of our own way, meaning our thinking mind, the body knows what to do. Intuitive eating says when we're little children, we know when to stop. We don't eat a whole bag of cookies. Like, we know what to do. So intuitive eating is about sensing physically hunger and fullness, but it's also, intuitive eating is a little tricky. It's also maybe holding the thought, I don't want to gain a lot of weight. I want to lose weight. I want to eat more vegetables. So it's a balance of, I'm sensing physically in the body, but I'm also connected to my goals. So for intuitive eating, it like before, internal portion control is one kind of sort of a concept. All right, before you're about to eat, you would say, what would be just the right amount of food for this moment? And before that first bite, because once you start eating, the dopamine takes off, and you're like down that rabbit hole. You can't stop. Anyway,
right.
So you want just enough food. And so before that first bite, you say, what would be just the right mental match? What would be the right amount for this plate? And knowing, if I want to lose a bunch of weight, I wonder if I could cut back by 30%. Would I be okay? And the idea of intuitive eating is You can always eat if you're hungry. Nothing's forbidden. That's a key concept.
Mm-hmm.
No forbidden foods. Because the scarcity concept, you're not allowed to have sugar, is going to send people on that pendulum.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Off the other direction. So you make a mental match. What would be the right amount? Knowing if it's not exactly right, you can always have more later.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So that's kind of a little bit of the intuitive eating.
Wonderful.
Wisdom.
Yeah. Wow. Well, definitely, no pun intended, a lot to think about today, and especially, when we go to eat. This has been amazing, Betsy. I think I speak for our listeners that this has kind of opened up a whole new dimension about the eating process, that it's not just we're hungry, let's go eat, and we like the food, so let's, pig out, but more being in tune with our bodies. This is amazing.
Oh, I'm so glad. There's a lot of information, or it is a whole other world.
Yeah. Well, this is wonderful. And looking at your podcast, you have a lot of other information related to this that you share. So if our listeners want to learn more, they can certainly go there.
Good. Well, that's awesome.
Great. Well, thanks again.
Pleasure. It really was. So thank you.
Thanks again, Betsy. Thanks to our listeners. Please leave an honest review on Apple Podcasts. We rely on these reviews to make sure we are delivering the best content that is relevant to your interests. Send us a screenshot of your review, and you will be entered to win a $50 Amazon gift card. Send your screenshots to podcast@feelbrilliant.com. That's FEEL brilliant.com. And this is Dr. Dan signing off. The information presented by guests in this podcast is their sole opinion and in no way represents the views of Discover with Dr. Dan, the Proactive Health Podcast, or Brilliant. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not replace professional medical care. Please consult with your medical doctor before making any changes in your lifestyle.